Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing okay today. We are going to finish up the economic policy part and sustainability part, and we're going to start with international. We'll get back into the presentation about international policy making and stuff. And probably the most famous and the most recognized sustainability goals is set forth by the UN, which is called the Sustainability Goals, the SDG. All right, and there's 17 of them. And if you notice, they got think just like the donut economics, right in the center of the donut economics. All right, industrial, decent economy, affordable, clean energy. All this stuff is basically stems from that economics, that donut economics donut. All these people have worked together. So take some time out and look and see what the SDG is all about. Remember, this is the United Nations, and it's not telling anybody what they have to do. They are just putting out goals to try to bring the world together so that we can work in common. Okay. So check this out. There's the SDG knowledge. Remember, there's also, I've been watching the market today, and I was thinking about the SDG investing. So there's a lot of people out there today that are just investing in companies that try to do these kind of things. All 17 one of these goals, and you can get rated as your company can get rated, and then people will say, "Hey, I like that company because they're doing good, and I'm going to invest in them." All right, I have a couple of stocks in my portfolio that accentuate these sustainability goals. Okay. All righty. So let us get into the presentation and get this over with here for you so we can get on with our weekend. How's that sound? All right. So international environmental policy. So international policy is vital to solving some of these transboundary problems we have because the world really needs to work together because pollution, carbon pollution, and any pollution is really transboundary. We can't contain it. It's part of the commons, right? So we're actually getting pollution from China on a daily basis because it goes up in the sky and blows over here, and they're getting pollution from us because it goes up in the sky and blows over here. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Fukushima power plant, but that had a nuclear power problem, and we are getting that nuclear waste washing up on our eastern coast shore over there in California and Washington and Alaska and stuff because we can trace that carbon or that uranium isotope, just like that lady was tracing the carbon isotopes. We can trace that uranium isotope and know that it came from Fukushima. Okay, so we have what's called international laws out there to help, but they are actually much weaker than the authority of like the United States declaring those laws because we have to go to court and all this other stuff. We just can't walk over there and start arresting somebody in another country. All right, so we have to always work together. So they're not as stringent out there, or not as in, I can't say harder to enforce than other laws, but they are out there. When we do sign those treaties, we give away our sovereignty as a nation and say, "Hey, we're going to abide by this and not import any ivory." Okay. Because globalization describes the increased interconnectedness of the world, and we are definitely all interconnected. We are one big old web there. We can fly to any country you want. We have trade, diplomacy, and communications and technology that have increased our links between countries, right? The COVID is a perfect example. I mean, that spread lickety split around the world, and as much as I can say, yeah, Trump did a good job doing that China travel ban. It was already here, folks. All right, and I don't know what that travel ban was going to do because China already had their people locked down, so they weren't going anywhere. All right, it was already out and about, and we have, that's why New York and California were hit the worst because in the beginning, is because that's where all the international travel really comes to. All right, it all comes into those little areas, and that's why they had the first real big impact. And you can see how it worked its way into the center of the United States. What a crazy case study this is in there being. The multinational corporations have little incentive to address issues like climate change and ozone depletion and loss of biodiversity because they can go any country they want, and if that country needs their business or needs them to create some jobs, they will give them whatever they can to incentivize them in order to go into business there. Okay. And sometimes their regulations are a little bit less. So sometimes when we enter a trade agreement with another country, we will try to address that climate change. Unfortunately, on this new President Trump did this new NAFTA agreement with Mexico and China, and some people voted against it because there was no real climate change initiatives in there. All right. So we need to be careful when we sign those trade treaties and international treaties. Customary laws arise from long-standing practices or customs that held by most cultures, where we have a treaty with other countries to send people, criminals, back over here that have done something wrong, such as um, murder somebody, or if they actually, you know, killed a bald eagle. Okay. We also have what's called conventional laws, which arise in conventions or treaties. So those conventional laws are the ones, about the not doing any international trade with ivory. All right. And there are a couple of major international environmental treaties. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, okay, the Ramsar Convention of the Wetlands, all right, was international stuff. Montreal Protocol is probably one of my very favorite ones. That's when we started actually impacting the carbon or the ozone layer. We're getting this huge ozone hole up there in the atmosphere due to all the carbon fluorines we were putting out. And the world worked together, and we put a little tax, and we tried to get all those stuff to not put those out in the atmosphere to save the ozone. And guess what? The world worked together and it worked. Okay, and I think everybody's still able to use hairspray, right? Your hair still stays together. I mean, that's what some of those things were. And we still got refrigerants, right? We still got refrigerators and our food's cold. All right, good. Just making sure that all that stuff's happening. And thanks to the Motor Protocol, we are no longer getting cancer because we don't have this huge ozone hole layer. It actually worked. All right, there was also the Basel Convention, okay, and the Biological Diversity and Stockholm Convention. And the most recent one everybody's hearing about is the Paris Agreement, which was an agreement with the UN to try to curb climate change. And that was not saying, each country had only this much carbon to put out. That was the country saying, hey, we're going to try to do this. It was not written in stone. And right now, we are not going to be part of that Paris Agreement if Trump gets reelected. Okay, because he will take us out. He's already said he was, and we can't really get out or break our word until after the election. So after the new president is actually put in, so Trump can't do it until like the end of January or something like that. So if we get a new president, we might just stay in the Paris Accord agreement. Okay. A number of organizations influence the behavior of nations of what they can do. They do this through funding, some political pressure, economic pressure, or media attention. All right, one of those things is the United Nations, and they sponsor conferences and coordinate treaties and all this other stuff. So they really aren't a law enforcing entity unless they're actually there. We send our military troops into like Bosnia or something like that to help out. All right, they were just there to try to incentivize other nations and influence them to work together. Okay. And we also have what's called the World Bank, and the World Bank is money, so third world countries can actually go and fund and find the resources to build a dam or irrigation infrastructure or something like that. And they try to give low interest loans to struggling companies to help them reach development, and hopefully that development is sustainable development, not just development for growth purposes. Environmental policy strategies are categories into basically three major approaches. Okay, first we got the problem. A problem could be pollution from a factory that harms people's health. Okay, And when you have that problem, we try to find solutions. So individuals suffering that external cost of the pollution can go to court and they can sue the polluter saying, hey, you gave me cancer and I need compensated about this. Okay. There's a lot of stories about this. Aaron Brockovich, right? I don't know if you guys ever seen that movie, but she was one of the first ones to go after this leather tanning company that was just throwing all its toxins in the water, and everybody in the area was getting cancer. There's also a good movie called Gasland that talks about fracking and some of the problems that happen with the development here in Pennsylvania surrounding that fracking. And we'll talk a little bit more about fracking in the energy section. Okay. So there are judges that are reluctant to hinder industry. So um, it all depends on who appoints some of these judges, and the appointment of judges is done by the administrative branch, the President of the United States. Okay, so watch the Supreme Court hearing, and listen to what the pundits are saying, whether or not this new Supreme Court is business friendly or not business friendly. You can make up your own mind, and we'll tell you what to think on that subject. Okay. We also have another approach called command and control. All right, so we got the problem. We can come up with solutions and go to court. All right, judges can do it, or we can just do command and control. And there's an approach where the regulating agencies, such as the EPA, prohibit certain actions and sets limits with punishment and violations. So that's the EPA's job: is to set those limits. They talk to the scientists and say how much lead are you allowed to put in the atmosphere to keep it safe? And if that company goes over the limit, then they get in trouble. They will either get fined or some kind of other violation. And this approach has produced most of the positive environmental changes in the United States. So when people say, I want to get rid of a regulation, I ask them, what regulation would you like to get rid of? And let's talk about it. All right. And see what's actually feasible. And remember, no one really gets in trouble for, the company may have to pay a fine, but no one very rarely goes to jail for environmental pollution and hurting someone. The only case that has ever happened, all right, was a government official actually went to jail for the Flint, Michigan problem. That was the first case in history that I ever know of, all right, that people really paid some personal consequences, okay, because some of our laws allow you to hide behind the word incorporation, not have your personal assets or be personally responsible. And that's the way our society is, okay? You can decide whether that's good or bad, because if they don't, they might not take that risk if they have their house on the line, per se. All right, so to some, government mandates are viewed as restrictions to freedom. Oh, we can't have that. And an alternative, an alternative is to use financial incentives to encourage the private companies to change or to alter the multiple dynamics. And there are three approaches we seek to internalize these external costs suffered by um, the public. So all three of these approaches we just talked about, with suing somebody and making some command and control, all right, and realizing that there's a problem and fixing it ourselves, is all part of the equation. So green taxes discourage undesirable activity. So we can put a tax on something, on an environmentally harmful activity, produce what's called a green tax. And green taxes are reimbursed to the public for environmental damage, either by giving a tax refund to the individual, or to individuals separately, or actually fixing up the problem, all right, or investing in new infrastructure that will help out in the future to alleviate that environmental damage, all right. The impact fee imposed on green gas drillers is an example of that. And I'm not too sure. There's an impact fee, but there's also what's called a severance tax, which the impact fee just deals with the direct environment of doing the well itself. There's also what's called a severance tax. We don't have a severance tax here in Pennsylvania. Every other country, every other state does. All right, we're probably the only state. I can't say every other state, but most of the states in the region don't have a severance tax, and that's used to help with the roads. and stuff like that. If you come out to my farm someday and drive down the road, you'll see that the fracking trucks with all the heavy water and stuff, equipment, have ruined those roads. And that environmental impact fee is not part of those road constructions. All right, the environmental impact is just the environment and pollution. If that well leaks their water all over the road or something like that. But the fixing of the roads is not there as well. Green tax is also meant to encourage pollution control as a more affordable incentive than paying the tax. So if you put in the incentive, that's kind of like that carbon fee we talked about. If you put in that pollution out, you're going to get in trouble. So if you have those controls and are not releasing that pollution, you don't have to pay that tax. So it's, we got to make sure that that tax is more than what the pollution controls are, right? To incentivize the companies to actually do that. It's also what's called a subsidy in the government give, which are government giveaways of money or resources that are intended to support or promote a industry activity. All right, and subsidies are often comes in the forms of tax breaks. So we'll give a subsidy, like I got a tax break to put on my solar panels for my farm. All right, I got a federal, a state, and a USDA grant, as a matter of fact, to help that out. But there's also government subsidies for oil and gas as well. Believe it or not, the oil and gas industry gets more subsidies than the renewable energy industry. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the energy section. But when I was a financial advisor way back when, I remember I used to sell this oil gas limited partnership. And boy, those people made some good money in that thing. But the advantage to that, the break was that if you sold some stock and you had a whole bunch of capital gains, you could just go ahead and buy that product and sell that stock and not have any tax. All right, so that was their incentive. That was a subsidy to invest in the oil and gas leases. There's also conservation reserves, which pays farmers to conserve areas of natural vegetation around the farm. We talked about this with the cutting of the grass here in Pennsylvania. The subsidies may also encourage environmental impacts, such as U.S. Forest Service buildings, roads, and national forests are enable private timber harvesting and stuff like that. Fossil fuels industry receive the majority of the U.S. subsidies. I mean, it's huge. Look at the oil. Oil gets $369 billion annually. Natural gas 1.12. So you can see here renewables, wind, solar, geothermal, biofuels. Nothing. It's just a little tiny slice of this pie. And in my humble opinion, these industries, this is just me talking, these industries have been around long enough. I don't think they need any more of our monies. All right. I think we should put our monies right into here. All right, because they already have a huge subsidy of not having to pay for the carbon that we are leaving. So that's a huge free ride for these industries, even though that free ride would be put on us, the consumers, eventually. Okay, it still is a huge form of a subsidy. There's also what's called emission trading, that cap and trade that we talked about. It's a system where the government creates a market of permits, and then everybody's allowed 200 tons of carbon per se to put out into the atmosphere, and someone uses 150, and another person uses 250. They can buy that other 50 from that one company, and then they'll be able to do that 250 and get away with it. Okay. And it's called cap and trade system. And this is actually, we've done this before. We did this on the SO2 part of sulfur here in the United States, and it worked tremendously. And everybody still has electricity, right? And it's still, most of it comes from coal, I'm pretty sure. All right. And that's what that cap and trade system did. We did that way back in Bush seniors. And, we could mimic that whole exact thing for carbon emissions. And I wish we would have done it in the 90s. In my humble opinion, I think we just got to go with the tax, but I've said that many times already. The U.S. Pioneered this approach. Like I said, during the sulfur, they pioneered it during the sulfur dioxide emissions in 1990. The Clean Air Water Act. It was great, and it has been adopted a lot around. Okay, even with the carbon dioxide. Okay. Um, Many municipalities charge residents for waste disposal according to the amount they generate. So a business, of course, is going to have a higher bill than a individuals. And this places an incentive on reducing the waste and increasing recycling for the household. So if you're getting paid by the pound for your waste, you're going to try to reduce it. Okay. There's also what's called rebates, which may also give to residents who buy high efficiency appliances and stuff like that. Obama did a thing like that when we had the housing bubble way back when. Uh, he incentivized everybody to go out and get new high efficient washers and dryers to spur the economy. And you got a tax rebate if you did buy one of those things. Okay. And to buy those, you just got to look for the eco labeling. All right, so you got the USD Organic, the Energy Star, the Fair Trade. So there's a lot of eco labels out there. You, as a consumer, can look and see if your products you are buying off the shelf are doing that. All right, and what you do, you can actually go back and look up and see. You know, if this is a Whirlpool, you can go to Whirlpool and look up their sustainability statement. Okay, and then take it a little bit farther in your research if you like that company. Okay, because there's been a lot of corporations greening their efforts, and they are pursued mostly for public relations. And sometimes don't have too much of an environmental impact sometimes. And that's called greenwashing, but they're just trying to market. But there are some companies that are doing a lot of good out there trying to change their economic or their ecological footprint. I've been seeing a commercial from Amazon saying that they want to be zero emissions by the year so and such and such. It's a good cartoon or a good commercial, and I think that I think Amazon's doing the right thing by doing that. Okay, because it's more efficient. But sometimes you got to watch it and see if there's any greenwashing going on. Right. So sustainable development is a very important part of the SDGs, right? Sustainable Development Goals, and this definition the United Nations uses is meets the needs of the present without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. This is the base standard, and it depends on what needs are, right? And in my humble opinion, if you look at the donut economics, right, in the inside of that donut economics are all the needs I believe people need. All right, I'm not saying that everybody needs a car, but they need some kind of transportation. I'm not saying that everybody needs to eat 25,000 calories or whatever. They just need to have the proper food and nutrition available to them. Okay. I don't want to tell people what shoes to wear and stuff like that, but I hope that everybody's able to clothe and house themselves. Okay, I believe those are the needs, those two base parts on Maslow's hierarchy needs. But also, as an ecological economist, remember the outside of the donut is all those biogeochemical cycles, all right? The nitrogen cycle and the fresh air, global warming, good water, and all those other things. That is also a need because we need to have a sustainable environment for us to be able to get our needs and live good. All right. So development is different than growth. Development describes the use of natural resources for economic advancement, not just survival. All right. And it's for the improvement of quality of life. All right. Because sometimes we can overconsume and have a good quality of life, but our utilities, the law of diminishing returns comes in. After we eat our 10th apple, are we that satisfied? All right. Previously, economic development and environmental protection were seen to be conflicting ideals, saying that if we try to clean up the environment, we are not going to be able to do what we used to do. We're not going to have any refrigerators, we're not going to have any cars, and such and such. But believe it or not, when we actually put in these environmental protections, we create jobs. All right, the sulfur industry is one prime example. When we put those scrubbers into those coal-fired plants, The electrical cost did not go up that much, but the jobs did because we had to clean those scrubbers, we had to make those scrubbers and clean those scrubbers and maintain those scrubbers and all those other things. So that created a whole bunch of jobs and kept the sulfur out of the environment, which it didn't rust our cars anymore, and all of our because it created acid rain, so it didn't rust our cars anymore or ruin our monuments and things like that. So it was very advantageous for us to have that put into our system. Okay. Today, pursuing sustainable development means satisfying a triple bottom line economy. Um, Triple bottom line of economic advancement, environmental protection, and social equality. So, we have to have some certain social goals where everybody has a good education, economic goals where everybody has enough money, and also environmental goals where everybody has a clean environment. And somewhere in here is that sustainable development matrix. So we're going to have some give and takes, and the world's going to have to work together to live in the sustainable development paradigm. So there's been many summits of the world leaders over the past to get to this sustainable development. Like I said, the sustainable development definitions, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future, was done in 1976. And in 2015, we finally came up with the sustainable development goals that we saw that I showed on that website there. Okay, and that was a long, arduous project of the United Nations and world leaders working over decades to come up with these goals and coming up with ways with the World Bank to be able to invest and things like that to get these goals up and running, right? And I'm really excited about it because I see that a lot of these third world countries, we want them to be able to have the food and stuff, but we can't have them, consuming like Americans. And I think they can actually leapfrog right over coal and oil and go right to renewable energies and live a life style that is very comfortable and similar to ours, um, but just not as much consumption. All right. So you can go to the Sustainable Development Goals and see all these websites. I showed you on that website the end poverty in all forms everywhere. Okay, and in hunger all the way down to reduce inequality within and among nations. So those sustainable goals are can be seen right on the website right here, the UN Sustainable Development. I showed you that when I first opened up the list. And there's, just like the donut in the donut economics, that's exactly where this comes from. Okay. So that is it on the international part. All right. And remember, the international community is just trying to work together. No one's trying to tell you what to think or what to do. They're just putting out some good ideas that I think will actually help the world live a little bit kinder and gentler on this nation. All right. So don't forget you have that test, folks, that is due on next Wednesday. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop me a line. Thanks. Bye bye.